This podcast is sponsored by Cornerstone Healing Center, where they guide people through a transformative experience and into lasting recovery. They focus on addiction, trauma, family systems, and co-occurring disorders. If you want more information on how to get sober, call them at 1-888-320-7992 or check out their website, scottsdalecornerstone.com. Hey everyone, it's Brandon Lee, host of the podcast Escaping Rock Bottom. I've got a really amazing guest on today. Not only is he going to share his experience, strength, and hope, he actually works in recovery. He's the head of business development and admissions over at Scottsdale Cornerstone Recovery in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's a great recovery center. They help a ton of guys get into recovery and stay sober. So we're going to get into what exactly they're doing over at Scottsdale Cornerstone, as well as kind of hopefully answer some of your questions, because my inbox, it is flooded right now with so many opioid addiction and heroin addiction right now. Going to welcome Saad into the podcast. Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have your story on the podcast, because I don't know, it feels right now that there's just a ton of people out there who are struggling right now with opiates, pain pills, and we all know that pain pills eventually will lead to heroin addiction. I feel like every time I ask somebody, how did you get hooked on heroin of all drugs? It wasn't marijuana, it wasn't tobacco, and it wasn't booze. For some reason, heroin is always a derivative. It always starts with pain pills
100%.
For so many people. Take me back, Saad, to your childhood. Where were you born and raised?
So I was actually born in Sarajevo, Bosnia in 1990. So right at the beginning of a pretty epic war.
Right.
My mom's side of the family was Muslim. My dad's side of the family was Christian. So obviously,
how was that as a child growing up in just even that religion household?
It made getting the household part wasn't too bad, because so my dad stayed back in Europe, and he didn't come overseas with us. My mom, she grew up in a super diverse community where, I mean, at that time in Sarajevo, there was Catholics, Jews, there was Muslims, there was Christians, they had everyone in the community. So it wasn't a big deal until they went to war with each other because they didn't want each other. So when I grew up, as I was growing up, my mom let me, believe in whatever I wanted to believe in. I remember having the Quran. We celebrated Ramadan. We celebrated Christmas. We went to church. She was super down with whatever. I think she had a lot of generational trauma from what just happened, because I put myself in her shoes. She was 42, so I just turned 31. I have 2 kids. I have a 10-year-old and a 2-year-old boy. I couldn't imagine everything going to hell in a handbasket right now and picking up and fleeing with what you have on your back, man. You know what I mean? Like, it's a fucking story.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That is a lot. I'll come back to the religion aspects. I'm always curious as to kind of, did you grow up, was it a super religious family?
No.
It wasn't?
Not at all.
Okay.
No, they let me believe or not believe. They left me the fuck alone.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are you close with your parents to this day?
My mom actually passed away 17 years ago.
Wow.
This Monday.
Okay.
So the day after Mother's Day.
Okay. And do you have a relationship with your father?
No.
Okay.
Not at all, man. And that's a whole nother story, but through the amends process and going back and trying to do the right thing. So I'm really close to my aunt and my uncle. They're like my parents. Okay. And in making the amends process to my aunt, I found out my dad was still alive. My mom had told me he had passed away just because of the systemic trauma and everything. She didn't want me to have any part of that. And so 2 years ago, I made contact with him, reached out, and he said he didn't want anything to do with me, which was fine. But at the end of the day, I could go to sleep at night. I mean, I've got 2 sons, man. I couldn't imagine me having these kids and a war happening and then me not seeing them for fucking 20-something years and then not knowing. So I wanted to make sure I reached out, and I'm glad I did, man. I'm at peace with it. I don't know what's in his shoes, man. You know what I mean? Like,
why do you think, and I skip past the childhood stuff really quick, because I find this really, really fascinating, because I'm estranged right now. Yeah. I don't have a relationship with my mom or my dad. My mom was she hates that I label her like this, but she's sick. She didn't heal. I will leave it at this. I love my mom. I will always love her. She will always have a place in my heart, right? My therapist have taught me to take the good, some of the good that she was able to gift me, and leave the bad. Right. Take the good. Thank you for the good you gave me. Leave the bad and kind of move on. And choose family. You choose a motherly role in my life. I don't have a relationship with them. Why is it that your dad, when you reached out to him, when you did make amends, why did he still reject you or push you away?
To be honest with you, man, so this is what I know. Everything I know is secondhand information, but I was a love child. So my biological dad was married. His wife couldn't have kids, whatever. He had an affair with my mom. She got pregnant. War happened. Boom. So I don't know what the fuck's going on in that house. I'm happy it's not my house. You know what I mean? Like, I could only imagine, man. Like, at the end of the day, I'm sure it kept him up at night. You know what I mean? Like, it's a really heavy thing to have to deal with.
Okay. So when did you start? For me, I became a sex addict at age 15.
Right.
Got a young start at having sex, but also was sexualized at a very young age. So it's no surprise to me that, I was repeatedly molested as a child and overly sexualized, that I escaped with sex at 15. And then cocaine at 15 too. So I started kind of early. When did you start dipping into drugs or alcohol or some of that behavior?
So the first time I actually had gotten drunk, it was third grade. My mom had gone overseas back to Bosnia to bury her father, and my sister is 12 years older than me. So at the time she was 18, so she was a senior in high school.
Right.
Like any other senior in high school whose parents are gone for any significant amount of time, they throw a house party. She's like, hey, there's going to be a keg there. I had watched American Pie with my buddy like the week prior, so I saw a keg, and then within the keg there was titties. I was like, cool, I'm going to lose my virginity. Like, all sorts of delusional thought process at an early fucking age.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
you're like, American Pie took me down.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah,
and so I remember being at the party, and I was looking around, man. At a very early age, I could relate to that. Not feeling like I wasn't a fan of life, man. Like, I would have rather been dead at a really early age. And so the first time I drank, I remember drinking and feeling better, like that sense of,
yeah.
And I was looking around, and there's pretty girls at the party, and they're talking to the jocks, and the jocks were all buff, and everyone's happy, joyous, and free. And I was like, I figured it out, man. This is it.
Yeah.
This is it. And the next day, dude, the fucked up part was I'm a 90s baby, man. So I remember, like, dare and don't do drugs. And if you do drugs, you're going to become homeless and live on the street and lose your job and go to jail. And I got drunk as fuck. And the next day I woke up and none of that shit happened. I was like, dude, I think these adults are wrong about this. And if they're wrong about this, I'm pretty sure they're lying about it, and they're lying about everything else. So at a super young age, I remember, like, this thought, because my 10-year-old, he's going into 5th grade next year, but at this time I was in 3rd grade. I remember that thought process. So I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, it was a little extreme at an early age, man.
Yeah. So did you get into, what led you to heroin then?
What you touched on in the beginning, man.
Yeah.
My mom had died from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2004, the day after Mother's Day. And, my sister, she was older, she struggled, had her, battles and so on and so forth. And I ended up, my best friend's mom, actually, man, she ended up adopting me when I was like 15 and a half and taking me in. And at that time, we're smoking weed every day. That was a common thing, man. We'd sell weed, smoke weed. Everyone was doing it. It was high school. And what happened was I was smoking weed. I went to my buddy's house to go smoke some weed with him, and there's a knock on his bedroom door, and his mom's like, hey, Michael, I got those pain meds for you. He has his wisdom teeth taken out. And he's like, damn, yeah, Mom, can I get 2 of them? My mouth hurts really bad. And she comes back and drops 2 Vicodin in his hand and goes away. He hands one to me. I eat it. 2 seconds later, I'm like, what was that? Like, typical alcoholic shit.
Right.
Man. And he's like, it's a Vicodin, man. You're going to feel good. And fuck, what did he understate that? You know what I mean? I felt like God had come down and parted the heavens and the clouds and made amends to me for taking my mom, and like that missing link in life, that fucking, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I was like, it was like in the big book, it has a bunch of promises. Like you could look at the world in the eyes. You could be at perfect peace and ease. You feel the nearness of your creator. All of those things I experienced the first time I did opiates. It was the most beautiful, profound, and sudden fucking spiritual experience I had ever had in my life. And I loved it. I was like, this is it.
Yeah.
This is it.
Man, the same feeling that you had off that Vicodin, I had off the first hit of meth that I ever did. You know, that's what that first hit of meth did for me. And that's how I felt. I truly felt like for the first time that I actually loved feeling dark. Like the moment I took that first hit of meth, it was this feeling of feeling like Superman, like I was a superhuman, that I would never feel pain. Like I felt so good. It was just like in that moment, all that shame, all that guilt, everything lifted, and I just felt so good and felt powerful. But also felt dark, and I loved it. I loved that feeling of having that darkness. You know, at that time, I always told people like I would never be an actor, but if I ever did, I'd want to play the dark character.
Right.
Like I don't know what it was about that dark that I loved that role. Like I just loved it.
No, I get it.
And it just like
I get it.
don't
We
know.
all have our thing, man.
Yeah, dude.
We all have our
I
thing.
just loved it. So eventually, man, I did a documentary here in the Valley a few years ago. Several years ago, and it was about shot in the dark, harm reduction, you know, going out needle exchange programs, right?
Love it.
And so I was out with them filming that documentary, and there were 100 people that showed up in this vacant parking lot to get their supplies, tourniquet, cooking plate, all that shit, Narcan,
Clean needles.
yeah, clean needles,
The
right?
vital shit.
Yeah, the stuff you need to at least like.
Not
Listen,
spread
I'm not here to
disease.
get you sober,
Yeah.
but if you're going to fucking do it, which you are, I would rather you use clean supplies
Yeah,
so that
and not
you're
spread
not
a
getting Hep
disease.
C.
Yeah.
And, right. So 100 people showed up in 45 minutes, and I spoke to all 100. And I asked them the same question. How the hell did you end up in this vacant parking lot getting a tourniquet and getting supplies for heroin? Like, what led you here? 100 out of 100, it all started with a prescription of pain pills, right? And so it's like I need people to understand, the general public to understand this heroin addiction that we're dealing with in this country, this crisis, is born out of prescription pain pills.
Yeah, I'm a product of Purdue Pharmaceuticals. Man.
Right.
So I was
That's what I
Oxycontin.
try to tell people. And I even tell lawmakers whenever I get the chance, whether I'm speaking at panels or speaking to them, I'm like, listen, the drug companies that you are taking all this money from is the same people who are creating this epidemic that we have in this country with heroin.
100%.
And I have two friends who are doctors, and they do like root canals and stuff like that. They're dentists, but they do root canals. I forgot the name of the exact specific thing that they do, but I've been with them at lunch, and I've been with them at dinner, and they're like, here's another patient telling me that they need a Vicodin or they need a Valium. And they're like, no, you don't. Like ibuprofen will work, because they know the dangers of that.
100%.
I had to have surgery, and they gave me Vicodin. Well, my sponsor had to stay with me for those period of 3 days. And she was writing down, right, every 4 hours when I was taking a pill. So she'd give me one. Apparently 30 minutes later, I'm like, can I have another one? And she goes, holy shit. It only took you 2 days to become addicted, and like flushed them down the toilet. Right. That's how quick it happens. What was your rock bottom like? Like when you finally got sober?
Yeah, man. So I could tell you exactly what that day looked like. So I had gotten kicked out of a drug treatment center for selling drugs. It's frowned upon. You can't do that. I mean, they never once, like in the orientation packet, they were never once like, hey, man, don't sell heroin to other residents or managers. Like, don't do that. So me being a drug addict, man, I was 24 when I got sober. I got kicked out. And my girlfriend at the time had picked me up, and I was in her house, and her mom, like they knew I had my struggles, but they also felt bad. So like they didn't know what to do, man. And she called my sponsor at the time, my girlfriend, and he gets on the phone, man. He's like, do you want help? And I'm pretty sure it was a lie, but it ended up being the truth. I don't fucking know.
You're right.
But I said, okay. And he's like, cool, you're going to go to Banner Thunderbird Hospital, man. You're going to go to detox there. And I was like, okay, man. And on the way there, man, I had some dope, and I'm in the car. I'm in the parking lot of the hospital, and she's a normie, and she's like crying, saying, why are you doing this to yourself? Right. As I'm cooking up, I've got a seatbelt around my arm. I'm dripping blood because I'm so dehydrated, so sucked the fuck up, man. And she's crying. I'm like, will you please shut the fuck up? And I find the vein, I hit, and I tell her I'm sorry.
Right.
I don't know why I'm doing this, man. I can't picture life sober, and I can't picture life loaded anymore. And the next series of events is super fuzzy, man. I remember getting Narcaned and all this shit. I had overdone the mark, and I'm laying in the hospital bed, and this sudden realization of this is what your life is going to look like for the rest of your fucking life, man. And I was in a psych hold, man, because they thought I was suicidal because I was suicidal. I had made enough comments for them to realize what the fuck was really going on.
Right.
And true story, man. I tried getting sober in 2011 at the Salvation Army, and I met this guy named Marcus. And Marcus is the executive director at Cornerstone. We've been friends for 10 years. And but this is 2014, and I'm sitting there in a psych unit. And I look at the door, and it opens, and Marcus is walking in with a client that he's dropping off because he's been sober for 3 years now, and he works at Community Bridges, and he's dropping off a patient. And I just remember melting in my seat because I didn't want him to see me out of shame. But also, man, I was like, that motherfucker is still sober, and he does AA. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And beyond AA or whatever AA it is, but he's stayed fucking sober.
Right.
And I was like, motherfucker. And, dude, they gave me a list of halfway houses, and within the halfway houses, I picked one that I'd gone to before for a meeting, and I went there, man. And I remember when I was doing the intake paperwork, a guy named Jerry at the Hope House on Van Buren, man, he's like, I don't think your hips slick or cool. I remember him saying that. I was like, what a fucking asshole. But I needed to hear that, man, because my whole life I had hustled people.
Right.
I sold drugs. I had gotten in fights. I had manipulated people, lied, everything, man. And so when he said that to me, I was like, all right. And of course, I'm going to see what the boundary is. And there were some serious fucking boundaries, man. And he's like, you're going to be home by 9 p.m. You're going to get a job. You're going to get a fucking sponsor. You're going to go to a meeting a day. You're going to make your bed. You're going to do a chore. By the time you leave here, you're going to sponsor people. And I just remember being like, has anyone ever fucking done all of that shit? You know what I mean? Like, it's a long list.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, man, 6 years later.
Damn.
Yeah.
You know, it's an amazing story to hear, because I want people to know that they don't talk about this in the rooms. The efficacy rate. Mm-hmm. I mean... And that's why I want to get into how you're maintaining your life sober, because there's not a lot of long-term efficacy when it comes to heroin and when it comes to crystal meth. Like, there's just not like the percentage of the amount of people who are hooked on meth and heroin who get sober and stay sober. It's not a great deal. Like, if we were talking efficacy and we were in the teens, talking about teenage percents or in the 20% for those hardcore drug uses, to me, that's not good enough, right? And to me, I think we have to, at some point in the world of recovery, look at the efficacy rate when it is just meetings or if it's just a 12-step program. Because I'm of the belief that it has to be a multi-pronged approach, right?
100%.
It has to be a multi-pronged approach to go back and heal from the trauma, to go back and do those things. And just like I don't even think talk therapy is enough in order to heal yourself from the actual trauma. And I am of the belief that addiction is born out of trauma and unhealed trauma.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a reason why people are numbing. There's a reason why people are escaping.
That's my experience.
Yeah, it's absolutely mine as well. Mm-hmm. And I think when we start to really look at the medical field, and we start to really talk about medical professionals, and we really look at traumatic events and trauma, that I think that if we start to really heal and address the trauma, we can get long-term efficacy. And I ask people all the time, because I speak at treatment centers, how many of you have relapsed and how many relapses and how many times you've been into treatment? And you start to really look at people who have kind of been in and out of treatment centers over and over again. And I start to ask them, okay, well, what are you not doing? Or what have what's not being addressed that continues to bring this pattern of in and out, in and out, in and out? A lot of times it's because they haven't healed from their trauma.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I've done stabs. I've gone to meetings. Okay, but have you healed from the trauma? Like just going to a meeting is not going to heal you from that trauma, right? No. Meetings are like a sliver of a large pie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Luckily, my sponsor, he knew what his scope was, and I have a therapist as well. So at the time when I got sober, there weren't as many resources as there are now for people with, state-funded policies or whatever the case was. Right. So I went through community, Banner, Thunderbird, CBI, and Sober Living. And my sponsor and the group that I got sober in, it's a little bit different, man. They look at it more of like a big picture. It's not just, I'm not just here to take you through the steps. I've taken sponsees to interviews. You know what I mean? Like everything. So, but that's not everyone's story. And so I know you and I were talking beforehand and like what makes Cornerstone a little bit different, man, what our approach is. So Estel, you've talked to him, man. He's a dear friend of mine. I love him like a fucking...
And Marcus.
Yeah, I love him like brothers, man. And I remember... we were talking one day and we're at a meeting and this newcomer, just newly sober, comes out of a treatment center and he stands up at the podium and he has some treatment talk and the audience kind of chuckles and laughs. And because what he's saying isn't aligning with our message. And so Estel was really off put by that. And he's like, man, I want to marry the two. I want treatment.
Yes.
And whatever fellowship you choose to come together and be a unanimous front where they know like, hey, this works, and we're going to do all these things together. And man, he had come by. I was working at Calvary actually in the PHP department. I'd worked there for 3 years and he had come by one time and we were just joking around, man. He's like, how cool would it be if I started a treatment center and we did this and helped guys get sober? But that'd be the coolest thing ever. And a couple of days later, he's like, hey, can you come to dinner with me? And he's like, I really want to do this now. He's like, I've been thinking about it, man. And 5 months later, he wrote me an offer to come work for him, man. And ever since then, it's been one miracle after. It's like a miracle factory, man. And a lot of places experience that. The only thing I think that's a little bit different than us is we're long-term care. We're abstinence-based. We don't do any medication-assisted treatment. If someone wants Vivitrol or whatever, that's fine. But we don't believe in prescribing opiates to treat opiate addiction.
Right.
And we're very firm in our stance. And we're not for everyone, but the ones that we are able to help, it seems like they're able to stay sober.
It's interesting because I tell people if I could go back and kind of recreate my path in recovery, I never went to treatment. I never went at all. I went from discharge at the hospital from 2 overdoses and life support to an AA meeting. And I'm grateful for that, right? And I tell people all the time, like, yeah, I got sober going to AA meetings. Were those first 2 to 3 years easy?
No.
Oh my God.
It's a miracle.
Dude, it really is, considering the amount of meth that I was doing at that point. And I mean, to the point where 2 times in 2 weeks, I'm on life support at Hollywood Presbyterian. And I just went to an AA meeting and I stayed sober. Never went to treatment. Okay. But if I can go back and rewrite it, I would have freaking absolutely done at least 30, 60, or 90 days in treatment to create a foundation. Because when people decide to go to Scottsdale Cornerstone, you're not just freaking going to meetings, okay?
No.
You're meeting with therapists. You have access to things like EMDR, different modalities that can begin to rewire the brain. And you could have, I wouldn't have white knuckled as much as I did in those first 2 to 3 years, right? And it took a lot of inner strength in order to not relapse in those first 2 years. And I was white knuckling because all I was doing was going to meetings and working with a sponsor, but I needed way more than that. I needed at the very beginning to do talk therapy, and I should have been doing EMDR as a way to get back to lower amygdala where all that trauma is stored.
Yeah, and I shouldn't be walking around public, going to a job interview or anything. I should be locked up
And mind you, 60 days sober, I started a new job at CBS News in Atlanta, Georgia. So I flew from LA, moved to Georgia the first 60 days of recovery and started a new job. It was insane. I did everything you're not supposed to do. Start a new job, move to a different state and all those things.
Big life decisions.
Yes. And I managed to stay sober by the grace of my higher power, who gave me some serious freaking inner strength to just not relapse at that time. But that's why I tell people, no, man. If you've had a problem with opiates or drug, just do I tell people, do at least 30 days. Do at least 30 days of treatment, build a foundation, and then start life.
You have nothing
for
to
that
lose.
Reason.
Nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose and everything to gain with a solid foundation. Like, why would you want to build a home without a solid foundation? Because the chances of that home crumbling or cracking or the water pipes bursting, it's like huge. Build a solid foundation. What's one of the things over at Scottsdale Cornerstone that you think is really kind of helping people, especially during a time of a pandemic where people have been losing their shit and relapsing?
We haven't stopped helping. I know a lot of places had closed because of the pandemic or had to change protocols or whatever, and we've just abided by CDC guidelines and been able to help people. One thing I could tell you from my firsthand experience that I think is helping a lot of people stay sober is we do long-term navigation. So they get set up with basically a recovery coach. And up until this point, recovery coaching was for the well-to-do. You know what I mean? Like
100%.
You had to pay a substantial amount of money. This guy's going to meet with you a few times a week, set up goal lists, take you to job interviews, X, Y, and Z. And we've been doing that with insurance providers, improving the efficacy. So we monitor someone up for up to a year, and then we step the fuck back. Yeah. We have an alumni event tomorrow, and our alumni event is huge. You know what I mean? Like, it's huge because we watch them become alumni. We watch them celebrate a year. We make sure if they need anything, they come back. It's an open door policy, man. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into the office or the clinic. I see a dude who graduated a year and a half ago. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, come to do yoga. I'm like, high five. Yeah. Like, whatever. Go.
Okay, I love the fact that you brought up the recovery coach aspect, because when I speak at treatment centers, the other week I was at another treatment center and I'm looking at them. I'm like, y'all need to understand this, okay? Sponsors are not your fucking therapist.
No.
And they're not a counselor. They're not a psychologist. The role of a sponsor in any fucking 12-step room, the only thing they should ever fucking do is walk you through that book. That's it. The reason why recovery coaches, I think, are so important, and I would rather if everybody could have a recovery coach over a sponsor, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
The reason being is because a recovery coach is educated. They've gone through training.
They have clinical support.
Yeah. They're able to, and it's really important, just like a therapist, they're able to take off their lens, their life perspective, and they're able to put on yours to see life through your lens and your experience. We all come to the table with a different background, different religion background that may impact the way we look at life. Right? And we have to be able to take off our perspective and put on yours in order to help you and design a program that works for you, because not every program, it's not universal, and not, my program may not work for you, and the way you've designed your program may not work for me. Right? But a recovery coach is able to tailor a program that works specifically for you that may not work for John sitting next to you.
100%.
And I think that that's so crucial and so important, that aftercare aspect.
Yeah, it's vital, man. I mean, I'll tell you right now, one of the biggest issues I ever had with working in treatment was, working in a residential setting and then a client coming in for 30 days. We take their phone, their keys, everything. They stay with us for 30 days where we do everything for them, make their food, make their bed, tell them when to go somewhere, walk them there. And then on day 30, when they're leaving, we hand them back their phone, their keys, and all the shit that they have not addressed. So we don't do that, man. After like the second week, they get their cell phone back. When we start processing those things, I can't tell you how many times a client comes in and, hey, man, my dope dealer just reached out to me. Right. Really cool. Go grab your phone. Let's go get their therapist and walk them through it and change phone numbers. But whatever the case is, man, it's like this isn't a spin drive, man. If it was, we'd all be fine. 100%. We would have gotten fine the first time.
Yeah.
It's just not a thing.
What's your thoughts on relapse? I have kind of my own thoughts on relapse and in this world of recovery that we live in. Because there's been a lot of relapse during the pandemic.
Oh, a lot, man.
I mean, a ton.
Yeah, and I had relapse before I tried getting sober. I did not get sober my first try, man.
Which, by the way, everybody who's listening is very normal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's very normal for people not to get it the first or second time.
Oh, not at all. The only two people I know are Marcus and Estel, really. I'm like, and are you guys like really alcoholics?
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah,
they for sure are. So I don't think relapse has to be a part of everyone's story.
Okay.
And I also think a lot of times we use the word real, like there's been, and we've talked about the efficacy rate of, meetings and stuff. I think one of the biggest variables that make that number dwindle and lower is the fact that when someone comes into a meeting or twice and they don't get a sponsor and they don't do anything else, man, we count them as a relapse, but they never really got sober. They stopped using for like a day and a half, and then they got loaded again. But whatever the case is, and I've seen a lot of people relapse the last year and a half, and it was that disconnect, it was isolation, and lack of accountability. To answer your question, I mean, I've got a sponsor. I've got a vast network of people. I've got essentially like a board of directors for my own life.
Yeah.
And that's just how, and that's how it is, man. Like if I have an idea and I think it's a great fucking idea, I'm going to call someone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? And they're like, oh yeah, that's good or not good.
Yeah.
But I'll talk to them, man. And it's just a level of humility, man. Like I didn't get here on my own.
Yeah.
I didn't get sober by myself. I didn't do any of this by myself. And the same things that have helped me stay sober and sane for the majority of my sobriety and it's from day one, still work today, even though my mind will tell me, you've outgrown that solution. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's back to basics. Calling someone daily, staying current. I've got a 10-step partner that him and I know all the crazy, stupid shit that goes on in between our ears. Yeah. We talk about it. There's no shame.
Yeah. So that's so important for people to hear because I too, every Tuesday, it doesn't change. The time stays the same with my talk therapist. It's a 2-hour session. Mm-hmm. Thursday does not change. It's in my calendar for 2 hours every Thursday, and I work with a shaman. I do deep breath work, and we go back. I dip in, go back to the inner child. I mean, like legit work with a shaman where I get past the frontal lobe. I get all the way back to the lower amygdala, and I go back to that inner child that was so horribly abused and heal. So those two things are on my calendar every week. They do not change as part of my recovery. And so, which I'm super grateful for. But here's the thing. I don't count my time anymore. I don't count days. And the reason why I don't is because for me, it was all based in ego, getting those chips, right? Doing all that stuff. I put more weight in those than I actually did about how am I doing today?
Yeah.
Because I have met guys, Saad, who had 30 plus years of continuous recovery. Congratulations.
Miserable as fuck.
They're miserable as fuck. Well, congratulations. You never picked up a fucking drink or drug.
Your
life's fucking miserable. Like I'm not using anymore because I want my life to be fucking great.
Yeah.
So I stopped counting time because to me, it was all about more quality. The quantity meant shit.
Yeah, dude. Physical sobriety, I think is basement fucking. It's basement level.
100%. And there's so much more to achieve and to live. So I stopped counting time and I just don't even care anymore. I'm like, because now it's just to the point of like, I just want to be fucking good today. Like, am I in a good mood today? Yeah, I'm in a great fucking mood today. So that's all I fucking care about. 100%. I don't care if I've got 12, 13, 14, 15 fucking years sober. It means nothing to me. And
it means something to my aunt. It means something to my wife. And it helps the newcomer. But I got to tell you, I don't wake up and I'm like another fucking day. I don't. I ask God for some clarity and some guidance to be a good person. And the sobriety is a byproduct.
Right. This guy at a treatment center asked me when I was speaking, because I was like, I don't. And he asked me, he goes, how much time do you have? And I was like, does it fucking matter? Like, do you like the message that I'm speaking today? I'm like, because to me, it's like when we walk into a meeting, somebody goes, hey, what's your name? You're like, Saad. What's the second fucking question they follow up with? How much time you got? Mm-hmm. It's without fail. How much time you got? Because to me, in that immediacy, we're sizing somebody up and we're taking rank and we're taking a position of authority if I've got more time than you. Just in the immediate, whether it's conscious or subconsciously, like that's what's happening. So it really should be like, hey, man, what's your name? Saad. Hey, man, how's your life today? Are you married? How's your family life?
Yeah.
Like, you good?
How are you?
Job? How are you?
Yeah.
That's all that should matter. And the reason I say that, and I've been really emphasizing that, is because there's been a shit ton of relapse during this pandemic. And I want the person out there to know, who the fuck cares? Of course you relapsed. The opposite of addiction is connection. Your connection was ripped away from you, not by your choice, but by freaking everybody, by the government's choice. So of course you relapsed. Who cares? You didn't lose what you gained. You had 5 years before. Great. You didn't lose those 5 years. You didn't lose that wisdom, that knowledge, and that journey that you gained along the road. Just get back in it. Pick yourself up and continue on. Don't let the shame of having to feel like you got to collect some white chip that says you're only 24 hours sober prevent you from continuing on the path. Because I think there are too many people out there who carry that sense of shame that now they got to cash in all their chips and start back at day one, because they relate day one back to, I would relate it back to me on life support in the hospital. That's not where I am today.
Yeah. No.
You know, so that's kind of, it's more or less for the people out there who have relapsed being like, who cares?
Yeah, no one gives a fuck. That's just like, ego.
Ego. Nobody cares.
I had a sponsee call me a couple weeks ago. He was sober 5 months.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
5 months. All the things started happening that happened within the first 5 months. He got his license back. He got out of sober living. He was happy. Same thing happened. He moved out of sober living. A little bit of disconnect and lack of accountability. And he called me. He's like, man, I relapsed. I'm sorry. I was like, dude, there's nothing to be sorry about, man. But the people getting loaded doesn't surprise me. When people stay fucking sober, that's what surprises me. As a drug addict and alcoholic, dude, it's a vital part of your life to not be sober.
100%.
So now you're talking about spontaneous remission from, you know what I mean? Never getting fucking loaded again.
Right.
And
mind you, it's a disease.
Keeping that.
Right. It's a disease, but our disease, we're not allowed to take anything for it other than just to fucking stop.
Yeah.
But if you got cancer, if you've got like, you know, another disease, type 2 diabetes, there's medication for you. There's solutions for you.
Well, no one's like, oh my God, your blood sugar crashed.
Right.
Like, you fucking suck, dude.
Right.
Like, they're like, oh my God, let me help you. Let me fucking help.
Exactly. Addiction is just the one disease where we fucking shit on people who've made a mistake.
Yeah. Well, and
tripped and fall.
And it happens. It doesn't really happen.
Society does that.
Well, and I think what you're doing is awesome, man, because I think there's a huge stigma around drug addicts, alcoholics, and mental health, man. It's like
huge.
I remember when I was a kid, being in my friend's. I was like in 5th grade, being in my friend's mom's car, and there's a homeless person. She's like, "That's what happens when you do drugs." I'm like, "No, it's not the case."
Right.
There's drug addicts like you and I that get up every day, that are productive members of society,
for sure,
and they struggle, and that's that disconnect, man. It's not. I've seen teachers, doctors, police officers, firefighters, healthcare professionals. No one's immune from it, man.
Nobody. It crosses all socioeconomic bounds.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why.
And when it has you, it has you.
Oh, dude, you're done.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is. It doesn't care your political affiliation either. It doesn't care about if you grow up in Paradise Valley, if you grow up in Maryvale. It does not matter. The problem is that the people who are addicts up in Paradise Valley don't fucking speak out because of stigma out there, right? They're the CEOs or this person or this
100%.
person. And the people in Maryvale, right?
It's shame.
Right. But that's the society thing. So my message is always, you PV rich CEOs who I know are recovered addicts, get in front of a damn camera and put a face to addiction and talk about it so we can end the stigma.
I got to tell you,
man, end it.
I got a buddy of mine, Jared Gordon. I want to hook you guys up, but he's a UFC fighter. He lives in Florida. I just went and visited him. UFC fighter, been sober, you know what I mean? All that cool shit. And he talks about it. Like, he's on the front lines trying to help people get sober, and he's also a professional athlete. And it's like so beautiful to see. Man. Like, I mean, it's everywhere. And I think the more we use our voice, the more we could help.
Oh, 100%. And I will say this, that when I came out so openly about my drug addiction past, sex addiction, drug addiction, hanging out with Satan worshipers at one time when I was at the depths of my meth addiction, because that's just how dark I got.
It's probably going to happen.
It just gets real dark.
Yeah.
When I came out publicly about that, we had this thing in TV. It's called a Q score. It's your likability score. And my likability score skyrocketed after I came out telling everybody about the shit that I got myself.
Because you're fucking human.
Because you're human.
Yeah.
So I want people to understand that, like, what we think people will hate us for might actually endear us to a whole new group of people.
And give someone hope.
Yes. Because if we continue to be anonymous, there are going to be so many people who die alone.
So that's
and
funny you
suffer
bring
in
that
shame.
up. I don't believe in anonymity.
I don't either.
Not for myself. I'll respect your anonymity, but dude, I got to tell you, man, like, it's not a thing. I don't walk around screaming it from the hilltops, but I also, like, bro, my doctor knows I'm a drug addict.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm across the board with it.
My bosses know.
Right. Well, right. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm there to be a maximum service. I got to tell you, man. I had a call from a family member who at one point in time used to tell me, like, I'm so terrified you're going to die.
Yeah.
And they called because their cousin's son was struggling with addiction. And it was just mind blowing that she thought to call me. You know what I mean? And now he's sober, he's in treatment, he's getting the help he needs, but it's that stuff, talking about it, not being ashamed about it.
Yep. 100%.
We're not lepers. We're not.
No. You know, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I'm going to, I mean, people come at me hard all the time. I actually had to step away from the AA program because I was just on CNN, MSNBC, and I wrote my book, and people were like, yo, man, you are violating our 11 tradition, your podcast and all that stuff. I was like, yo, listen.
It's 2021.
Thank
I don't
you.
care.
I was like, you know what? That's cool. I will respect you. I will walk away from this. I'm not walking away from recovery. I'm not walking away from so much of the 12 steps that I still love and use on a daily basis. If I fucking screw you over, I tell you within an hour, I'm already apologizing to you, being like, hey, I'm sorry for the way I approached you on that. So I use so much of the stuff that I've learned and gained. But I tell people this, I am not going to shut up. I am not going to shut up, because if there are like 23 million addicts out there, and let's just say only 2 million ever walk into a 12-step room of AA. Well, you know what I tell the AA folks? There's 21 other million people out there who need to hear a message. So you all preach to your choir inside the walls. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, there's some people that don't know about meetings.
100%. So
They
you
just
guys
don't
take care
know.
of y'all. I'm going to go outside the confines of these rooms and help the people who are out there who will never make it in these rooms. Like, you continue to help the people who are in these rooms, but some of us have to step out of these walls and use a platform and reach those people who are suffering in silence.
100%.
You know, full stop. So I will tell, as we close, what's that one message of hope to the people who are struggling right now?
There's a solution, man. Like, as hard as it is to believe, you never have to feel that way ever again. Like, there is hope, and the hope is the things we've discussed and talked about, and there's ways to find those resources and to do it. Give yourself a fucking chance. I remember thinking that I had a moral deficiency, or I was a bad person because I was a drug addict, and not knowing. And then when I found out where the solution was and got the solution, I realized what the problem really was. I was not a bad person.
Yeah.
I was a drug addict and I did bad things. Same thing, man. Get the help that you deserve and you need.
All right, so if you are looking for a great place to get sober, perhaps your child is struggling right now, check out Scottsdale Cornerstone. It's an incredible treatment center, Cornerstone Healing Center. They have guys that are super relatable, and the guys over there like Saad and Estel and Marcus, solid group of guys, and they're motivational, they're inspirational, and it's a great group. And I always say this: if you're struggling right now, build that foundation from the very beginning. Do not walk the path that I did. Don't just think by going to meetings it's just going to be enough at the very beginning. If you want long-term efficacy, build that foundation from the very beginning. Get your ass into treatment for at least 30 days. If you want more information about Scottsdale Cornerstone, we're going to provide that for you right now. This podcast is sponsored by Cornerstone Healing Center, where they guide people through a transformative experience and into lasting recovery. They focus on addiction, trauma, family systems, and co-occurring disorders. If you want more information on how to get sober, call them at 1-888-320-7992 or check out their website, scottsdalecornerstone.com.